Welcome to day 2 of DCD Zettastructure. Yesterday was an amazing day, lots of new content formats, lots of networking, lots of knowledge sharing, and we're going to continue today. This is our opening plenary. I'd like again to thank all of the sponsors of DCD that make this event happen, all of the staff, and of course all of yourselves for coming down and being part of this community. There's a couple of housekeeping notes. They are, make sure you download the event app if you want to get further information on the speakers and if you want to plan your day. There is a network, Zettastructure, for the Wi-Fi, and here's a password. So if you need to use your phones over the day to connect with other people, please make sure you're connected. Another reason for the connection is we'll be using Slido today. If you go onto your phone and go to slido.com, up will come a screen, pop in the event code DCD 2016, and you'll be able to ask some questions of the panel. We'll be bringing your questions up during the presentations, and we'll select them, and hopefully we'll have time to go through most of them. You can even vote on what you think are good questions. Now, yesterday we dealt with the size of the Zettastructure in the morning session. The Zettastructure, the word we use that's big enough to embrace everything that's connected in the world. Bruce Taylor guided us through that yesterday, that presentation. We had Microsoft, we had Vodafone, and we had Vapor.io speaking. And today we've put together another plenary panel. It's a lightning conference. So the format is that each of these speakers are going to do a short 10, 12-minute presentation, and then they're going to discuss that presentation live in front of us, and then hopefully answer some of your questions. So without further ado, I'd like to invite today's panel's plenary givers up to the stage, and Bruce Taylor to give a short presentation. Please, gentlemen. You don't need to touch it.
George's instructions to me, quite sternly delivered, I might add. Don't touch the clicker. You didn't use it yesterday. Don't touch it today. Right? That was you, wasn't it? Yeah, you got that. So, this is a big topic. In September, we had a DDoS attack that took down OVH, a very large hoster. And the September attack was a botnet, 150,000 CCTV cameras primarily that were unsecured, that had never had their passwords changed. And that attack accounted for 1.5 terabits per second of what you're seeing on the screen behind. And it was a massive failure. On October 21st, 1 week ago, we had an attack that took out 2/3 of the United States. Essentially the same thing. Passwords on devices that became Internet of Things devices were the default passwords provided by the manufacturer and had never been changed. And that was the lurking vulnerability that left me without internet for about 6 hours on an afternoon on my ranch in New Mexico. And I was really upset. But it also disturbed commerce for a very large part of the United States. The internet was never designed to be secure. Tim Berners-Lee, Vint Cerf, when they thought about security originally, and they decided not to burden the original web with security by design. They wanted to leave that to others. They wanted to find out what would happen. Well, we're finding out what happens. Now, when you marry Internet of Things with DDoS attacks, you have, again, a massive lurking vulnerability in the very areas in smart cities, in smart buildings, that we're seeking to proliferate in the world in order to solve some of our larger problems. So it's time to have this conversation. The world of operational technology, building information management systems, industrial controls and monitoring, all in history are very sophisticated systems, but they were unique, they were site-specific in many cases, and they were never intended to be connected to a larger world. And all of a sudden, we're asking them to be connected to a larger world. So what has worked in the past is not going to work in the future. We know that our infrastructures are inherently insecure by their nature, and now we're being asked to have them be connected to the universe. So I'm not going to spend any more time on this because we've got a wonderful panel that I think is going to really talk this up and leave you, as you leave this session, with a very different understanding about what your responsibility is in terms of the security of your facilities. So, Massimiliano Falcinelli, would you please begin and take us on a journey? He is the head of security infrastructure for the International Atomic Energy Agency. He's also a professor of cybersecurity at Webster University. So, Massimiliano.
So, good morning, everybody. Probably some of you is already wondering why we are showing this movie. I was in touch with George a few weeks ago as I just built a simple tool. It's a scanner that try to identify machines, SCADA system connected to the internet, try to geolocate them, give me some information not only about the geolocation, but really give me also a picture, if I can, and then to show me an image of the device I'm able to reach off, and then send the real comments to see if I can control it. And you can see that this is where the machine is really telling me, yes, you can control me. It's nothing really special, but this tells you that those machines are there. They should never be so easily reachable via internet. And I'm always surprised that I can connect to them how many times I want, and nobody never stopped me. So I will just go now to the slides. Can go forever. So thank you for your introduction. And when we talk about critical infrastructure, I think we should feel all responsible because it's mainly all our life. You can see, I mean, every single sector, we work on it as a provider, or as a developer, or as an engineer, but we are responsible because today we control really everything through and via internet devices, IT devices, network, VPNs. So, but what really changed? Because 10 years ago when I was, let's say, kidding a bit with friends about cybersecurity, we were doing a few things. It was really easy for us to get there, but nobody was really so worried about this. But things change a lot. What I really think changed is that 10 years ago, clearly, we were not talking about this type of position in the IT world. We were not using so much social media. And if you see this picture, on 2005 in the same plaza, everybody's just there listening. After a few years, everybody's just with an iPhone or an iPad or whatever. We didn't have so many fiber cable everywhere around us. My father, or probably my grandfather, was just using that small machine on the left. Today I go around with so many devices every day. We were not even thinking about a navigator of such. And clearly, we're not thinking that you can get an operation with a doctor sitting somewhere else in the world. So if you think about this one, you can get quite scared in somehow, because most probably, and also about this one, here, somebody can simply be there with an IMSI catcher and try to get your IMEI, and then try to track you down, see where you are in every moment, following you all around the world. Quite easy in somehow. More difficult today, 2 years ago was really easy. Still easy in somehow. This guy most probably has a simple connection to the device on the other side of the world. And you are the patient. You should not be so happy, because it can be that somebody can hijack that connection and do something really wrong to you. When we talk about SCADA systems, sometimes we think SCADA, ICS system, every type of system. Sometimes we think it's so difficult to find them. You can simply go to Pastebin, and you can find that people are saying, oh, I got those devices. That's the password. They're there. They're open. Just log in. There is not only Pastebin. There are many other methods. But today, people that, I don't like to call them hackers. I like to call them engineers, because they are really good engineers. Those good engineers, they like to share their information real time. I get this machine. I got this website. I got this email. I got everything. Every day you find thousands, millions of information. Sometimes we can say it's not a critical system. This is probably a young guy that just found this SCADA system. He say, okay, I can close the fences of a university. It can be. If I want to perform a terrorist attack on that university, probably I'm happy if I can control and close all the fences and turn off all the lights, for example. If I decide to do it 7 in the evening, it can be useful for me. Then there are other groups that are really cybercrime organized groups. They also share a lot of information with admin password. You get there. And believe me, you find password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in many systems till today. Other times you can just do a brute force attack easily. You get the password because nobody stops you. You can start to try all of them. And that's what really worried me. How come nobody's watching? Nobody's stopping me? And then again, then we see some malwares, no? Like what happened in Ukraine or many other places around the world. I found the vulnerability, I find my weapon, and I launch it. What really changed? We all know. Yesterday somebody mentioned that. Clearly, after Snowden, you can see that nobody was even talking about IT security before Snowden, and after that, every single day you have some news about security. So that's surely changed our life as a specialist in security, and clearly our life in general, because we are all aware of what we are talking about now. But what's the main difference between ICS systems and about IT in general? When we talk about IT, we build a piece of software, whatever, Python script, a Perl, .NET, whatever we do, we think about security. We want to be sure that there is a token for authorization or whatever. That's not the same in ICS, because what is really important is more the reliability of system, availability, maintainability. This is what is really important. We don't think so much about security. That's why it's so easy to connect to them. Now, how you find those systems? There are many ways. Thousands of tools that give you continuously every day new IPs that you can connect to. The most famous one is Shodan. It's not the only one. There is Internet Sensors, ZMAP, and so on and so on. These are real ones. These are ATM machines. I wonder why they are connected to Internet, from a Russian bank and from a bank from Portugal, if I remember, or Spain. I don't remember now. I think Spain. These are still there, I tell you. They are there. I don't know. You can get to the machine, and from there you can get to their network. You can ask to cash out. I don't know exactly. I'm not going to do it, but I found them. They're there. Google Doc is impressive how much information you can find from Google. If you know how to use it, how to query it, you can get a lot of information. And one of the last attacks we had, we are sure that it started using Google Doc to collect the first information it needed. So when we met with George a few months ago in Madrid, I was showing him that the day before my session, I was just trying to see how many systems I was able to get in without making any damage, clearly. I'm a white hacker, I'm not the black one. But clearly, you can see this house. I can control everything. This is in Italy. I was quite surprised. Galileo, to see stars, moons, movements. This is another system. I even don't know exactly what is this one. I just get there. And so on and so on. I will go really quickly. In this one, you can change and push the pressure, the temperature, up to 100. It's going to explode. Nobody's checking. So you are in, you say, please, push, push, push. And nobody's stopping you. And so on. I just go fast because there are so many that you will be, and this was just in, let's say, 1 hour. Imagine how much those people can do having us first go catch the system in 1 year. Most of them in the dark web, they have databases that contain millions of devices. They're there. They sell it as information. They're ready to be used. We don't know. I always think that they're really nice because in theory, they could damage a lot. They simply don't want to do it because of political reasons, probably. They don't want to mess up everything in 1 day, but they're ready to do it if it's needed. Another one, impressive. You can control the system. Clearly, I try to not show too much about the company. Default password in many systems, those are legacy systems, understand, but somebody should do something. Now, this one I prepared 1 week ago before coming here. What is really cool in this one, I will go really quickly, this is a really old software that you cannot even install in a Windows 7 machine. It's not going to run. You need a Windows XP. And that's the trick. I have really old machines on which I install really old software with which I can control really old systems. Now, how many of you have, I don't know, a Windows XP machine with these tools installed? Nobody. Really few. And that's the trick. Because nobody even knows how to connect to the system because they don't have these tools anymore. Only the operators have the tool, but you can also have it. And you can do what they do. I just go fast here. Again and again. Things where you can change a lot of settings, where you can see all the data, where you can list all the systems that are controlled, connect to them, change settings, change default password. Some they're really nice. They even show you the picture so you know what you're controlling. That's what's really cool. Now, so you get to a system like this, and then you say, okay, but most probably you can delete users if you want, clearly. But what is cool is that allow all traffic on one connection. How come nobody even teach these people? This is the first thing you should change. You put a system there that controls a lot of other systems, and great, everybody can connect. And then disable VPN. Why you should use a VPN? There is no need. So, and they even thank you. Thank you. It was nice that you are able to use my system and change all the settings. Really nice. So, other system, I just go really fast. I don't want to stress you too much, but power link. You can turn it off. People's going to be without electricity, without light. And again, this is quite cool. This is used by television to stream to internet. All the television moving to streaming via internet. How come you give everybody the possibility to control your systems? Let's think about the election in the US. What about if I can turn down all the streaming service? And then again and again. I go fast, solar system, most of them easily, and so on and so on. Another E1. So you can see that that was 1 hour of my time, no more than that. Webcam, those are professional cams. It's not just something. So what about if I want to do something wrong in that facility? I can move the cam. And what I really love of this one, that you can even stream back what you're recording. So I can record 1 hour, streaming back during the night. You see some cards going in and out. And the guard is there, say, oh, it's all okay. In the reality, it's me just streaming back what I was streaming 1 hour before. Another one. That's it. I tried. Was it too fast? Was it too slow? Was it okay? Thank you so much.
Open this up for questions from the audience. We'll also do it within the panel. So if somebody doesn't have something burning in the audience, let's go to the panel and begin a conversation about what you just saw. Ed, you must have thoughts on this.
I met Max for the first time yesterday, and very interesting discussion, or discussions. But so Max, obviously you've got a lot of focus on the ICS, Industrial Control Systems community. I think what probably people in the data center industry don't realize is just how exposed data centers are. And perhaps you could just touch on why data centers, critical equipment can be, like UPSs and cooling systems can be shut down in the same way as you were talking about some of those examples there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know if I have the right answer, but I'm going to tell you from my experience.
Yeah.
So I think it's always good to use real example. I had a case with a friend where we were able to turn on the alarm system of an entire data server, a server farm. So alarm system that says we are in trouble because temperature is really high. It's not true, it was all fake. When we went to the people and asked, how come is this possible in terms of physical security to access your center? Now you do so many checks, my passport, my name, everything, but then I can turn on all your alarm system. And when we interviewed the guy that was responsible, he said, I really don't know. We just ask another company to build the alarm system for us, and they do the maintenance. And because they do the maintenance, we simply hand over everything, and we only check if they're functioning properly. I think that is nobody's fault, but it's really a matter of agreement between, you should have you should check security at every single level. So if you have a guy that is maintaining your alarm system, you should have a checklist and be sure that everybody's under control. So those people simply connected the alarm system to internet, they were available, and we were able to turn them on. I don't know, it's just an example, but tells you the visibility. We are not checking, we are not monitoring, we are not alerting. That's the biggest issue, I think.
So, Barak, have you got a thought?
A quick thought, just it's interesting, your first slide, when typically talking about SCADA infrastructures, critical infrastructures, we all have in mind nuclear facilities, power utilities, etc. But I think it's important that you emphasize that it's essentially the same systems that control the infrastructures of data centers, and who can say that it's less critical when a data center goes out because the air conditioning goes out or the chillers go out. It could be more critical and affect a lot more people than a power plant somewhere shuts down or even blows up. So I think that's a very interesting distinction that you've made in the beginning. Perhaps it's worth, if you're familiar with the subject, being from a regulatory agency, is there some work being done in the regulation towards data centers, infrastructures, for example, in context of financial institutes, etc.? Not perhaps. No.
He's laughing because he knows very well that I cannot talk too much about that, so I'm not going to do it. But what I think is not easy. I mean, I said really clearly, it's anybody's fault. Now, it's easy to say you have done something wrong. It's really complicated, especially when we talk about regulation, when we talk about guidance, when we talk. Because how you match, plus, for example, the regulation with the monitoring. I'm discussing with many people around the world. If you have a regulation, you should also have a tool able to tell you if somebody is compliant. Otherwise, it's really difficult. I mean, you need a mix of really technical guys and a mix of lawyers and a mix of regulators. They work together and they do a checklist. They say, we are okay. Think about the ISO 27000. I know many companies, they got a stamp, but when you get there, you can use your USB token and get their machine in 3 seconds. So how come they're ISO 27000? Mm-hmm.
So we have a question from the audience, and it really plays into what Barak spoke of. After these DNS attacks that we've just had, DDoS, if we're trying to do industrial style IoT in the data center, right? And let's extend that to any mission critical facility. So that's utilities, nuclear as well as steam powered, certainly healthcare facilities. Within the data center itself, how at risk are we? What do we need to be looking at? Should people even be considering industrial IoT in the mission critical facility?
I start and then I give you the voice, really quickly. we will never be 100% secure. There is really no way. Even today that we use a lot of encryption, tokenization for authentication and whatever, you will always find a way to trick the system. So I think we should go on that path by saying again that for me what is really important, we improve in terms of monitoring. That's what we really need to improve. You cannot stop these people. I see when I study. Sometimes I study something, I think I will never get there. And then suddenly I found a trick. And everything is going to work. Plus, we are automatizing everything today. That means if I get one device, probably I get thousands of them, and nobody will never notice. Because there is no human interaction anymore. It's not somebody checking my passport. It's a machine checking my passport. So if I trick the machine, my passport is going to be checked rightly, if you agree with me. So I think monitoring is the key component there. I give you the word.
Always agree with you. That's first of all. And I definitely go with the monitoring as well. I want to give my personal opinion on the future of the industry and specifically IoT in data centers. I think that anyone trying to fight back on implementing more intelligent devices into data centers, specifically the industry 4.0 as a whole, is fighting a lost battle. No doubt in my mind that 4 or 5 years from now, we will have these intelligent devices. It's a similar discussion to what we had, I think, 10 years ago in the banking industry. Someone logging remotely into a bank, doing transactions from my personal home, from my mobile device. Unthinkable security issues, no way it will be done. But eventually, the efficiency drivers of the world, they prevail, and they dictate what the industry does. And if I have many data centers, efficiency and remote management of these data centers will prevail. So eventually, these systems will be implemented. Now it's up for us, as the architectures of the systems, to have security in mind when we designed the architectures, in my 2 cents.
So we're going to move through the questions from the audience quickly. The question that is any framework to secure and limit the risks, I'm going to interpret framework to mean standards in this case. Do we now have sufficient standards in place from a security standpoint? Yeah.
Well, the short answer is yeah, but they're a work in progress, and there are many. I think you'll probably see in the presentation later how many standards there are. It's applying the right standard. So that's the short answer to that. That yes, there are. We'll talk a little bit about the NIST framework later on, but I think we're missing a big point here, and it's not Barack's fault, or it's not Max's fault, because they don't live in the data center industry. The data center industry is oblivious to this problem. It has, and I'm talking about the power and cooling particularly, power cooling controls. We talk about monitoring. There are no monitoring systems in any data centers that I'm aware of. None. They don't exist. ICS is further up the learning curve than data centers. ICS has been suffering with this problem for the last 15 years. Most notable thing was the Stuxnet attack, which kind of highlighted everything to everywhere. Data centers are nowhere, you just cannot fathom how far behind data centers are. They're at ground zero. We're not talking about monitoring. We don't even have the basics in place. Okay, and I'm just setting the scene because I know we've got different backgrounds. But I did say to you earlier, that's how far we are. And just one other thing, I challenge anyone in this organization that has a data center, if you allow us to, we'll break into it too, into your data center electronically. And then we'll tell you that you've done it. You'll have to pay us, of course.
So the last question in this section, we'll go right to the top of the list here. What industry sector is most advanced in addressing this risk today?
There you go.
I think you're better to answer that. I give you the floor.
He doesn't want to talk about it.
Well, obviously,
Energy.
let's just say, a volatile energy sector, nuclear, in my opinion, is way ahead. But of course, this is all subject to secrecy and it's his bags, but he's not supposed to speak about it. This is my opinion. And obviously, the hyperscale guys, the big companies are aware of this. Nobody's telling anyone about this. There is lots of information. It's the sharing. It couldn't possibly be worse. There couldn't be less sharing. It's unbelievable. So the nukes at the top, Data centers, IoT as a whole, right at the bottom, subset of IoT, data centers, give them 2 out of 10.
Great. Okay, we're going to go to
Not
our
very
next
good.
speaker. Barak Perlman is co-founding CEO of Intigi. Take it away.
Thanks, Bruce. So I want to talk a bit more about, let's assume you have a data center and you want to start being proactive and deal with the architecture, with the monitoring, with the security of the data center. And one specific element that I was asked to address is the IT-OT convergence. The fact that we have IT personnel, which are typically more experienced or more typically deal with security and cybersecurity. On the other hand, we have the OT, the engineers that typically are more familiar with the infrastructures themselves. Perhaps a quick question, how many here are from the IT side of the organization? More? And how many are from the engineering side? Oh, interesting, perfect. So I'll try not to annoy anyone. I'll try to keep right in between. So a few things I'll dive a bit deeper. I'll try not to get too technical. Perhaps one thing, I was presented by Bruce, Intigi, we're providing a product to monitor these types of networks. And so I will talk a lot about monitoring the systems themselves. I will try to run quickly through the background a bit of what is an OT or ICS or SCADA for all means and purposes for this discussion, the same thing, just to make sure that we're on the same spot regarding the typical elements within such a network. So we like to divide into 3 types of elements. On the left side, we typically have HMIs, or the SCADA software, a bunch of Windows machines, like Max said, typically Windows XP, and we see all the ones as well sometimes. These are the computers that the engineers, the operators, use to manage our industrial environment, our engineering environment. Manage, measure, operate, etc. On the other side of this network, we have the physical components themselves, the IOs, typically they're called. These can be power generators, chillers, turbines, valves, pumps, etc. So many physical components that are simply getting instructions in their sensors and actuators, how to behave, what to do. The important thing that many times is neglected, definitely with people coming from the IT that are less familiar with these types of equipments, are the industrial controllers themselves. The PLCs, the RTUs, the IADs, industrial controllers, and they are always, or 99% of the cases, they are facilitating between the Windows machines and the industrial devices themselves, the physical devices. The main reason for this is that these are designated industrial computers built to run 24/7 for 20 years in real time, something that nobody trusts a Windows machine to do. So this is the typical structure of an industrial environment. Doesn't matter if it's a cooling for the data center or if it's a nuclear facility. What I want to emphasize here, and we will touch later on, is that these industrial controllers, when it was mentioned that security was not in the design of the network, was not thought of when the networks were designed, specifically we refer to the industrial controllers because they were designed late 80s by Siemens, Schneider Electric, Rockwell, Emerson, and neither of them, the concept cybersecurity wasn't even there. These pieces of equipment that actually control the entire life cycle of our cooling station, of our pumps, of our power generators, they were built to rely and trust any instruction they get from the network. There are no security measures built in these devices. And this is why, on one hand, they are so critical, because they are the ones actually managing the life cycle of the operation, not the Windows machines directly, but also they are the most vulnerable piece, typically, in the environment. So that's just getting a bit up to speed. When it comes to talking about what concerns the engineers, the OT managers, then I'm sure that many of you know, either if you're IT security and going to talk to the engineers or engineers yourselves, cybersecurity isn't on your list of concerns. You care about the availability of the system, the reliability, and if diving more into, let's call it incidents, not cybersecurity attacks, let's call it incidents, if something happens to my cooling in the data centers, to my chillers, I want to know how quickly I can understand what happened, hopefully before there is a physical implication to the data center itself, and I want to be able to do investigation on why that configuration changed. For example, someone changed the temperature in my data center. I want to know about it before it heated, and I also want to be able to backtrack and understand why that change occurred. So that is the kind of questions that we try to help answer. I want to touch now on the threats. So we talked about the concerns. Now, what are the threats? Where are they coming from? So the classic one that I won't elaborate much on is the cyber attacks that Max talked about just now. These can be either targeted attacks, either by other nation states, competition, cybercrime, etc., that you hear about it all in the news all the time, so I don't need to elaborate on that. It can be script kiddies that simply look online for connected networks and try to disrupt them just because they can. Something to remember is collateral damage. It was mentioned by Ed, the Stuxnet, somewhat 6 years ago. Stuxnet is very not interesting. It's very targeted, it's on an eastern country, very critical infrastructure. The thing is that Stuxnet opened the minds of other hackers in the world. And now other less responsible players, perhaps in the hacking industry, when they try to target critical infrastructure, and a good example is the Dragonfly campaign from 2014, if you're familiar with it, eventually, long story short, someone wrote a piece of malware that can interact with industrial controllers, PLCs, RTUs, and shut them down. The method they used to infiltrate into critical infrastructure is a widespread one. They hacked into one of the vendor's website and replaced a software patch with the malware. And it was really widespread between 500 to 1,000 facilities. The bottom line here is that if I own an ICS environment, an OT environment, even if it was not the original target of some other nation state, it's still vulnerable to the same attacks. Because what's important to remember is that the same infrastructure that is supporting the cooling systems and the power generators, the same industrial controllers reside within nuclear facilities and water treatment facilities and chemical manufacturing sites. It's the same exact system, the same Siemens, Schneider Electric, Rockwell, Emerson devices, and it's very important to remember that. Eventually, when going to talk with the engineers, they don't care at all, almost, about this. I assume you will agree. And what we try to emphasize is that when talking about cybersecurity, perhaps even sometimes not the biggest concern is the external threats, the typical cyber attacks. We need to think a lot about the malicious insider, the insider threat as well. The fact that typically, if we have a vast engineering network, we are very reliant on third-party integrators. They come into our facilities to set up the system, to provide maintenance, etc. They typically bring their own laptops. They connect to our environment. Who knows what they did with that laptop before? And they can introduce malware. Or they can configure the system to make sure they will come for another round of maintenance next week. So this is another threat that is always of much more concern to the engineering team, typically. And if talking about the insider threat, then we need to talk even about negligence and mistakes. Because if I bring my laptop to that data center, now I don't see all the computers and all the devices because they are hidden behind the walls, etc. And now I need to reconfigure one of the cooling systems. What is the IP or the address of the cooling system that I need to connect to? I probably have that outdated Excel sheet or manual Word document that I keep. And many times and times again, we see operational mistakes simply that cause disruption and downtime for these cooling systems, for these ICS infrastructures. What I think and what I believe is that when talking about cybersecurity for the ICS world, definitely because it's such a new territory, we need to talk about all these three different threat vectors at once and not just think about the malwares and the hackers and give the excuse somewhat to our managers. We're not a critical infrastructure. Nobody cares about us. They only care about the nuclear facilities. We don't need to protect ourselves. Because it's a wide range of different threats, that's why we believe that everyone that owns an ICS infrastructure needs to take care of it. I don't know how much time left, so I'll try to go really quickly a bit about the different mentality and different challenges. And Max touched on that, so I'll go in really quickly. The main thing is that IT versus OT, the technical aspects of the different systems. So we said in the IT, we typically have servers, PCs, Windows, Linux, that's about it, databases perhaps. In the OT environment, completely different devices. Siemens, Schneider, Rockwell, Emerson, we mentioned them before, ABB. The standards in the IT industry don't exist almost in the OT. TCP/IP protocol was designed more or less in the same time where the first PLCs were designed, which makes the case that if I have a Schneider Electric system, typically much of my communications, the protocols in my environment, will be Schneider Electric proprietary communications, undocumented, unable to monitor. If it's Siemens, it will be Siemens communication, Emerson, Emerson, ABB, ABB. Each vendor has their own, and this is why mainly IT security monitoring systems don't fit the SCADA, the ICS environment. We talked about the security of Windows machines versus the naivety of the ICS devices. I'll touch on the mentality a bit. The IT and OT come from very different backgrounds. And my favorite example is when going to an engineer and asking, why don't you let the IT security guys in the facility? Why don't you let them help with the security? And they like to say that what happens when you pick up the phone to an IT manager and tell them that something isn't working? They plug it out of the outlet, plug it back in, restart your machine, and call me again in 10 minutes. The problem is, if that I have a data center, I can't plug out the entire electricity for a data center. I can't restart all the generators in a data center. The engineers say they don't understand me. The IT say they don't understand security and what the concepts are. And that is the main gap that needs to be bridged. One technical dive-in that I will provide in terms of the technical differences is that I want to leave you with the thought, it will be a longer session to dive into it, that these industrial controllers are not a simple proxy between the physical equipment, between our turbines generators, and between the Windows machines. They have what is typically called control logic, ladder logic, inside these devices. And it's very important to remember, because many of the attacks that we've seen in past years, what they eventually do is deal and change this logic within the controllers. Some of the engineers here in the crowd, perhaps, when Max gave some of these examples, thought to themselves, yeah, if someone takes over my HMI, my Windows machines, for example, goes and sits there or hacks his way into the machine, and they will change the temperature in the data center from 4 degrees to 40 degrees, then us as an IT organization, we think, okay, that's a very scary attack, but those with engineering experience will think to themselves, that's not really an attack. Why not? Because in the PLC, in the industrial controller, we will typically have a threshold of never allow the temperature to go over a certain threshold. This was designed not because of cybersecurity concerns, but because of safety concerns. We can't have an operator falling asleep on the keyboard, pressing an extra 0, having our data center melt down. And what I want the takeaway from that is that the main focus and most of the cyber attacks, definitely the most sophisticated ones that we see, deal with the programming, the configuration, the logic of the PLCs, of the industrial controllers themselves, something we refer to as the control plane, the configuration, the firmware, etc. I'll be happy to elaborate in another opportunity. I will finish with what we started with on my take, the Indegy take, on how to bring the IT and OT to a common ground. I'll skip a few slides of time. The first thing when we come to an industrial environment, so if you want to secure something, Max said monitor something. If you want to monitor something, first let's know what we have in our environment. So the first step towards getting a secure environment is having a reliable asset inventory, asset discovery, automatically updated asset management system to know what are the different devices from the Windows XP 98 computers towards our PLCs, RTUs, industrial devices. Only once we have that automatically updated asset inventory, that's when we move on to monitoring the changes to these devices. So first of all, it's changes to the network, new devices being connected, but as I said before, changes specifically to the industrial controllers themselves, to the PLC, to the configuration of what is the maximum temperature allowed, or in an emergency shutdown, how do the turbines, in what order does the generator stop working, and when the emergency generator kicks in. Monitoring these changes. If you think about it, steps 1 and 2 are strictly visibility, not even security, strictly understanding what we have in our network. This is something that surely both the IT department wants and the OT and engineering department wants. On top of that, that's only when we can start building the security mechanisms. Once we have all the information, once we have the monitoring and understanding of all the different proprietary elements of the different vendors that we have in our environment, then and only then we can start monitoring. We can do real-time monitoring for changes, we can do behavior analysis, we can provide all the different range of cybersecurity, starting from detection and up until recovery of incidents. If something happened, how quickly can we recover from it? So visibility is the key word, and monitoring, like we said before, is the key word. I will end with this slide to wrap up again, our approach, at least, to how to bring the engineering and IT together, how to bring, first and foremost, security benefits, and taking care of the security portion of real-time activity monitoring, and risk analysis is another example. I didn't mean to dive into that, but since Max mentioned that most of the devices have default passwords in the facilities. The first thing, perhaps, if you want to upgrade your security posture in your data center infrastructure, is let's install a system that will monitor, but will also report back and give a risk assessment of the network. Per each device in the environment, we generate a risk score based on, is it a default password or not, based on the firmware version and other known and public exploits of that specific firmware versions. Are there patches released by vendors, et cetera, et cetera. We can do real-time activity monitoring and alert about suspicious changes to these PLCs and configuration of the network. So with that focus on the security, there's always the need to remember that by going the visibility approach, by collecting all the information there is to collect from that network, can provide a lot of operation support as well. I mentioned the asset management before, the automatically asset inventory updating. On top of that, we can add now configuration management. If I can tell you about each and every change in the configuration of your industrial controllers, it means that along the way, I can also create a backup for every change. So when something happens, for example, this device was here for 20 years, simply end of life, I need to replace it, nothing similar to a cyber incident, I replace the device, but still I have the latest backup in my Indigi system or in my monitoring system for that case. If someone takes a hammer, breaks the device, the same thing. And also when a contractor comes into my site and after 6 hours, I want to know what they did. Currently, typically, I have no visibility and no understanding what they did in my environment. This way, if I monitor everything, I have the entire audit trail, which devices they connected to, what exact changes they made to these devices. This allows me to replace a contractor later on and not be held hostage by them, and also provide security benefits by understanding better what happens in my environments. So we believe that operations and security go hand in hand together and are definitely not rivals of each other. Thank you.
So because we're running just a little bit tight on time, rather than move to questions at this point, I'd like to call Ed Ansett up, let you address a little bit of what you heard, but also do your presentation. Then we'll get into a Q&A at the end.
Sorry.
So how time constrained are we?
You do what you had intended to do. You're fine.
Do you have my slides, please?
Yeah. You got the clicker?
Oh, right. Okay.
No magic here.
Okay. Okay, so let's get on with it. So, frankly, we stumbled into this. Those of you that know us know that originally we're engineering consultants, mission-critical data center consultants. We're doing a study, an audit, national critical infrastructure a few years ago, happened to be looking at a chiller control panel in there, saw wireless gateway, train system, wireless gateway. Well, what the hell is that doing there? And what can I do with it? And that triggered a whole series of worries and research. And when you start researching this, as you surely will, I don't know how much time you'll spend on this subject, because by the time we're finished today, you will realize how exposed data centers are and how some of the myths, that things that you've been told by people are at least questionable, if not untrue. You will be worried. So we researched this as part of a couple of years before we started really trying to project ourselves as consultants and experts in this area. Because it's one thing knowing what a problem is, it's another thing trying to ascertain how extensive the problem is, and then beyond that, what on earth to do about it. Fortunately, our friends in the ICS community have been dealing with this problem for the last 15 years or so, which is why they're so much further up the curve. So data centers are a subset of industrial control systems. The point being here, and I will cut to the chase with a lot of stuff in the interest of time and hopefully just in your interest, all the protocols used in data centers, primarily their BACnet and Modbus, and to a degree SNMP, predate cybersecurity. They're almost useless from a security and encryption point of view. So once you're in, you're in. Another myth, people say, oh, I have a BMS system or a DSIM system, it's only controlling. Sorry, it's only monitoring. It's not controlling anything. I'm not concerned. Ha, really? Well, actually, you can easily turn that monitoring system into a control system once you're in. It just so happens that it's configured as a monitoring system in the first instance. And how do you get in? Well, we've been talking a lot about external attack, and that's obvious. I mean, through the internet specifically, that's the main door in. People fall into sort of three camps there. Those that are even aware of cybersecurity fall into two. So there's people that aren't even aware that they might have a problem. I must admit, I was one of those people a few years ago. They either believe that from a connectivity point of view, they are air-gapped, okay, which they think means they're not connected to the internet. That's a common story you'll hear people tell you. Or that you are connected to the internet, but we're secure because we've got the appropriate electronic perimeter. So far, every time we've been tasked to look at a data center and see if we can get in, whether they thought they were air-gapped or not, or whether they thought they had a secure electronic perimeter, we got in, each and every time. I'll show you. I'm happy to show you, not here, for legal reasons, but we can do it. Okay, so let's move on. So the backdoor exists. Why does the backdoor exist? Well, it's almost like the perfect storm in a way, isn't it? All of this money, I can't remember what percentage of technology budget was going on cybersecurity these days as a whole. Mike might know better than I do, but I think it's probably about 10% of maybe more of the overall technology budget being spent on cybersecurity. How much is being spent on cybersecurity of the data center, specifically the ICS systems? Remember that the data centers are a subset of ICS. Zero. Why? Because people don't know about it. Why don't they know about it? Because nobody's told you about it. Why haven't people told you about it? Because the ICS community know about it. Why hasn't the ICS community communicated to the data center community, which is a subset of ICS, that we have been working on problems? We mentioned famous ones like Stuxnet and so on, but there have been many, many, many others. Some of you might know to your cost, I usually put this to music, Pink Floyd, Comfortably Numb, and sit down at this point while we scroll through a bunch of famous attacks. We're not going to do that today. But the fact is, the problem exists. So air gapping the problem is that engineers, and we've got some in the room, for the most part, were not taught about software. For them, when they buy a chiller, or when they buy a generator PLC control system, they hand that off to a third party, the experts, and that's it. They do what they can within their own ability and their own knowledge, perhaps employ some consultants, perhaps not, but essentially they're outsourcing which you do, which is what of course you do, a subject which you know little or nothing about, to experts. It's a major problem because engineering systems contain software, and it gets more complex. Probably not going to need all of these slides, but the reason it gets particularly complex is because once you're in, how do you shut down a data center? And I said to you earlier I could shut down your data center. I know that sounded really crass. That's because I wanted your attention, and I want one of you to try and bite me for it. We were going to go commercial with this, but I'm not going to do it. But about 6 months ago in Monaco, I was going to say, sorry, George, it's a competitor conference, but I was going to say, here's the deal. Break into your data center, as long as you allow us, of course. If we fail, we'll pay you $10,000. If we succeed, you pay us $100,000, and we'll tell you how we did it. That's how confident I am, and how confident I am in the weakness of the M&E systems of every single data center. Further testimony to that fact is a guy that used to work with us, was head of security for a major US bank, very, very senior guy. My colleague, my partner in the US is here in the audience and was as shocked as I was when he said to me, I have no idea. So many people have said to me, I have no idea about what they had the penny, and you can't believe me. My mentor, Peter Gross, said to me, I don't believe you, it's rubbish, show me. Had to show him. Had to show him how to break into data center. Once you show people how you can do it, they go, okay. All these systems are vulnerable to one extent or another. I'm just going to go quickly through them. You know what they are. Sorry, slides are out of order. That's not my fault because I didn't rearrange the slides this morning. Somebody has messed with my slides this morning. Doesn't matter. What a point I really wanted to make to you about when I get to the key things, forget the legislation for a minute. In the data center, there are 3 dominant protocols, Modbus, BACnet, and SNMP on the power side. You will see stuff like Zigbee, LON Talk, you will, but it's there. It's 95% Modbus and BACnet. But Modbus has got no encryption, no password protection at all. Once you're on it, you're on it. And this myth about, I've only got a monitoring system is rubbish. And even if it were true, there's just a monitoring system, and you go to the Schneiders and the ABB's website, and they list out all of these devices and their vulnerabilities and these various meters. Once you lock onto one of those, at the very least, you can just hit it with a denial of service attack, just bombard the thing. You shut down your control plane, your control monitoring network because you flood it with information. It's straightforward, it's simple stuff to do. You just need that combination of engineering knowledge and technology knowledge blended together to be able to do this. So the point I'm trying to make to you is woefully exposed. This is the Modbus case in point. Modbus, bless it, as the guy said, these protocols were not designed with security in mind. They predate cyber. It's not a question of blame. It's just that we don't have a protocol yet which is secure in our data center. Hilarious, isn't it? One of my favorites, don't worry, we've got a new data center. We've just built ours, we're fine. Yeah, but you've got exactly the same protocols in as the guys had 20 years ago. It's got the same problem. Modbus. 8-bit address. Well, let me think. How long is it going to work out what the address is? Not very long. You can either guess it or spoof it. Function codes available anywhere. So that's how vulnerable Modbus. BACnet is a bit better, but not fantastic. So there's a couple of examples of real-life examples. I think people like real-life examples and specific around data centers. So you've got to understand that ICS have been dealing with this for 15 years, but the data center community have not been dealing with it because nobody has told them. And now, I was shocked to hear there was another consultant yesterday talking about this because I thought we were the only ones. It is a very serious problem. So which one is this? Oh yes, so this was, this is just a typical search. So the number of tools that you can use, anyone if you can use, to do a metadata search on ICS devices and the internet. If you're stupid enough to connect a device to the internet and don't secure it, you're going to have a problem. Somebody's already been there looking at it, not me, but nation states and people that are interested. What was it that saying? Are we allowed to say that saying without saying who it was? The Chinese, oh, maybe not. Okay, but the point. Okay, so the point is, you run a scan. You identify the IP address, okay? You're trying to identify from the search what type of device you think is on that IP address. When a port scan, once you're in, normally with the data center community, bless them, they don't patch the electronic perimeter of the firewalls. They tend to use default usernames and passwords. It's so common. It's such a basic thing to do, isn't it? I mean, it's like having a backdoor key. Everybody's backdoor key had no grooves on it, and then you had to get your key grooved for it to be specific to you. It's like everybody's got the same universal key if you've got the admin and user passwords, which are the defaults. And the defaults are usually easily available anyway, no matter who the manufacturer is. So that's classically, and then, and as Barak said, or Max said, that if that's not the case, then brute force for the stuff that we're dealing with, brute force attacks, because nothing is monitoring what's going on from an attack perspective in the data. So nobody would know that you've even been there. So this is the little fella that started everything. This is the wireless controller inside the train system. Okay, and this is a rather important chiller. When that stops, something really important stops. So I won't go into what. So I don't even need to go into the data center for this one. I don't even need the internet. You can have a nice day, have your air gap. You be air gapped. Yeah, and I don't need to do anything fancy by trying to get somebody to go into the data center and maybe upload some malware for a third-party vendor. I don't have to do anything like that. I just need to stand outside the data center with the appropriate device to shut down that cooling system whenever we feel like it. Maybe once every couple of weeks for 10 minutes. That'll get them guessing, destroy the reputation of the company, won't do much for the nation either. I'm not kidding. So somebody asked about the approach and how to deal with this. I said to you at the beginning, discovered the problem, was only happy to talk to people about this until we start to understand some of the solutions. The ICS community have beaten the path. They don't know it because they're talking about vulnerabilities and how difficult things are, but believe me, I mean, for us, we're just kids in the park kicking the ball around. They're the professional football players, right? We can look to the ICS community. We can learn from the ICS community. What they don't have is direct data center knowledge. Okay, that's different. Well, yes, it's a subset of ICS, but it's very specific, very technical, and in many ways complex. So it's a very serious problem. The New York State Department of Financial Services cottoned onto it last November. Still draft legislation. It was one of the slides that I flew by a minute ago, and they're threatening to legislate on that. So when that happens, your data center engineering systems will need to be audited if you're in any way either hosting or are connected to financial services industry. So, and then we've got proactive solutions, and there aren't many, right? I mean, this is an industry which is 15 years ahead of us in terms of we're just learning about this. Some of you probably be hearing this for the first time today. It's an industry that's 15 years ahead, and they've still only got a few proactive systems in terms of defense. Okay, but there is a lot that can be done. What would be great from a basic. Everyone worries about the internet, right? Okay, that's reasonable. Worry about that. Fine, air gapping and securing your firewall. That's not job done, is it? Every day, every week, some third-party vendor comes in because they've got to patch something for you. There's something that's so important that they've got to change the configuration of a DRUPS unit or a UPS unit or a cooling control system. So they come in and they bring their PC in and they get onto the control plane of that system and they make adjustments. And nobody ever checks what they're doing. Now, that's actually true of the ICS industry as well, to a point, and I happen to know that, and certainly true to a degree of the information security industry. That's a fundamental one. Very, very easy. We need to do something from a policy point of view from that standpoint. So I think that's about it in a nutshell. So if I kind of went off track, I tend to do that. That's it. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you. So we do have a couple of questions that I'm going to launch from right down here rather than stumble up the stairs. Is there any reason why any data center should even consider connecting to the internet?
Yeah, of course.
Ever? Okay.
Has to.
Okay.
You have to have your head in cloud, so to think that you don't need to connect to the internet. If you could air gap everything, that would be good. You'd still have the internal threat vectors. They don't go away. And so you still have a whole bunch of problems. But yeah, I mean, people
Should you build a firewall between the IT function and the network function?
This again, split this into two parts. There's what you know is connected to the internet and what you don't know is connected. Third-party vendor backdoors.
Yeah.
Did you know that SNMP cards have got an undisclosed, these are within UPS systems, have got an undisclosed port number that's used by a manufacturer in Taiwan to access the SNMP card You don't know anything about it. Backdoors probably exist anyway. So you've got to expect, it's not, the point is not whether you will be attacked and whether you can air gap. I think very few organizations in reality can air gap. You need access. Your people need access. They need to know what's going on. So,
Go ahead.
If I can add something really quickly, there is no system really secure. Because I teach cybercrime, I do research continuously. And today, those groups of people, they are really well paid, they are really well organized, and they have a big fantasy, much more than all of us. If I'm an engineer really focused on building a specific type of system, that's my knowledge. I'm only thinking that those people really think out of the box. And I always like to give example. There was an attack on an air-gap network. The way they got there, these people hacked the Wi-Fi, home Wi-Fi of the operator. He stole something in his machine because they knew that when he was going there, even if he was forced to use another PC, often he was also bringing his PC to check his personal email connected to the same Wi-Fi at the facility. They really target this guy. They hacked the Wi-Fi network at home, and they waited that he was going back to the facility. They got a message, now he's there, and they hacked the air-gap network. So at the end of the day, you have to maintain system, you have to operate, you have to patch, you have to connect new pieces, you have to upgrade. There is always a moment where you get connected. When we talk about APTs, advanced persistent threats, those are really well written. They're really hidden in a system, in a phone, in a machine, whatever you want. And they call back the cybercrime operator in a really hidden way. So I think that's why I really agree with all of you. We need a lot of policies, but we also need a lot of monitoring. And that's what I said before. So you can be sure that you are compliant. But believe me, I think there is not a secure system in this world.
So what's the responsibility? The question here reads, what's the degree to which OEMs are aware of the situation and planning or driving remediation? So Ed, you touched on that.
yeah, it's a big thing. So if you go to the major OEMs, I'm not as brave as Barack, right? And I'm going to call them out by name.
I mentioned 6. So.
No, anyway, I'm not going to call them. You go to the OEM's website and you type in cybersecurity. Go and think of some big names, and you will find a list as long as your arm of vulnerable devices. My understanding is then they would rather not put them on their website. My understanding is a certain government has told these organizations that they must put them on the website for the benefit of others. So God knows how many they know about that the government isn't aware of it. Internally they're aware of it, the government hasn't forced. I'm talking about ICS specifically here. Okay? Here's the problem. Whether you like it or not, we don't live in a Star Trek utopian world. Businesses are businesses. Businesses are bad enough at sharing information. You think they're going to tell their clients, their customers, oh, guess what? This data center we've just built for you, $200 million, 200 million pounds, or whatever it is, or whatever the money was. You've got extremely vulnerable protocols in there because we've got nothing better yet. There's no new industry standard for protocol. Oh, and by the way, you, Mr. X, of data center that's 5 years old, your PLC firmware needs a patch. The patch is available on our website, download for free. You think they're going to tell people this? They don't. So here's the problem. This might sound a little bit controversial, but it is nonetheless what I think. What you've got is commercial kind of legal constraints blocking ethical behavior.
Yeah.
Ethical behavior dictates that as end users should be made aware of these issues. At the very least, make them aware.
If I can add on that to relate to a different aspect of the OEMs, not talking about the disclosing of cybersecurity, but dealing with cybersecurity and providing products. So I think there's been a great advancement from the OEM's perspective in recent years, and we've been working with a few of them, and we were surprised to see cooperation from their side. But there are two factors. First of all, if I have a vendor X system, if I have a vendor X system,
X, yeah.
I'm not sure that I want my security solution to be from the same vendor X. We all have Microsoft Windows. We buy our antiviruses not from Microsoft. We don't want the same organization both providing the infrastructure and protecting it. That's one. Second, I don't have a single vendor data center. I have equipment both from X and Y and Z. And X don't monitor Y systems, Y don't monitor Z systems. That's, again, another reason why I want an external device. And last but not least, Ed mentioned it as well, eventually it's a business decision. And in this day and age, where all of you don't go and require that solution, but do require, for example, more energy efficient solution, that's why the OEMs will go and develop energy efficiency first before they develop cybersecurity. It's an easy business decision on their aspect. That's my take on that.
So is there, we know in data centers in general, there's just a big wall between the IT side and the OT side, right? We've been dealing with this cultural issue for as long as I've been around. And we've gotten nowhere with it, literally nowhere. Is that true also, and even more so, on the security side? Ed, in your opinion?
In my opinion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect hole in the fence, isn't it? I mean, the question, this division, actually, Bruce, it has got better than it was. I mean, some organizations, particularly the hyperscale guys, have kind of got their act together, okay? It's the old enterprises that haven't really woken up, that have talked about it. I'm talking about only data centers here, that haven't really managed to succeed in this. And even if I knew and I could guess, but I wouldn't go into why. The fact, I think we just have to accept the fact, for everybody's benefit, that the hole in the fence is that there is I think, a ubiquitous understanding that there is a problem in information security, particularly things like data security, data sovereignty, and so on. That's understood, that's funded. And it's, to whatever extent, is being addressed. Control systems guys, most of the control systems guys are dealing with really, really important stuff. Nuclear power plants, chemical plants, things that go wrong, the really, really bad things. Data centers are a kind of, in many ways, still a nascent industry. We like to think of ourselves as kind of growing up, but we are still, we've got a long way to go. The hole in the fence is simply that we have the budget on the information security side. We have a bunch of engineers who, through not their fault, because they don't have the requisite training in understanding things like firmware and software, pass it off to third-party vendors who haven't told them anything about it. The IT community haven't been informed. The ICS community haven't, for whatever reason, decided to inform the data center community, so therein is your perfect storm. Just needs to be fixed. You obviously can't fix the security issue in entirety, but you can at least make a start. We haven't started.
If I can add one sentence on the optimistic side again.
Well, I'm pessimistic.
So I want to give two real-life examples. One is with an oil and gas company, and one is with a data center, financial institute. And in both examples, what they done is within the IT security department, they brought in a couple of engineers, 2 engineers with complete background only in the data centers or the refineries themselves, and they taught them cybersecurity for a course, 3-4 months, and that way they created a synergy, because now you have people from the IT security department that care about security, that are responsible for security, but all their best friends are engineers. They speak their language, they know that environment, and really that created a bridge between the two environments. So I think that is one way of organizational restructuring to support the process a bit. And another one, more and more companies are taking the security department out of under the IT department, because there's really less justification for that now. So we don't have the CIO and the CISO beneath him. We have the CIO, and parallel to him we have the CSO, the Chief Security Officer, who's just parallel to the Chief Operations and to the Chief Information. And again, an independent department dealing with security, both on the IT front, on the physical front, on the ICS front. That's also a type of solution that we're seeing for collaboration.
So Max, do you see, is there the possibility of a best practices framework coming out of the nuclear industry that could be adopted by the data center industry?
These already exist in the reality. They're already there. I think we don't need so much in terms of standards or regulation or guidelines. We review continuously all those things, and we never get to the point. The reality is, and I tell you really honestly from my experience, how do you get security is expensive today? It's really expensive, and it's stressful. It's stress the business, because security is always saying something like stop the business. To really get security, in my opinion, you don't need only knowledgeable people. You need strong persons. I think like I'm a really nice person. Sorry to say that. I have to say that. But I can be quite strong in my... So you need people like me that go to some administrator say, starting from tomorrow, I will not give you any more access to your systems. And to get to your system, now you need this jump server, you need this token, you need this authorization, otherwise I'm gonna take you down. And even if they say, I don't care, you have to report then to the CFO, is not gonna accept what you say, I don't care, it's my problem. But tomorrow you won't have access. That's the issue. And plus you have to check continuously the status of your security. That's where I agree with you 100%. It's really difficult today. Things change continuously. New vulnerabilities are there every single day. Who is checking those things every single day? That's where the framework becomes really important. But I say again, we have frameworks, we have standards, we have guidelines.
Yeah.
We have tons of them, tons of them.
Have you seen the list of standards? We don't need any more standards.
Exactly.
Got it.
Right. We need a new protocol that's secure, which we don't have.
Okay, gentlemen, we do have to wrap now. Thank you very much. This has been fascinating, and this is a very big discussion. Thank you.